The entire NFL community is currently taking a second look at a video that is making the rounds. Not a press conference clip, not a highlight reel, and not an analyst yelling at a camera about quarterback ratings. Training footage of Shedeur Sanders moving in a way that hardly anyone would anticipate from a pocket passer vying for his starting position is raw, unedited, and has no production value. Additionally, every Browns-related comment section on the internet went completely crazy the moment this footage was posted, because what the public witnessed was not a quarterback tossing flawless spirals to wide-open receivers while dramatic music was added by the videographer to make it appear legendary. They observed a young man performing first-step explosion drills, resistance band work, and sprint mechanics at a level more appropriate for an NFL quarterback or track athlete than for a quarterback. If you believe Shedeur Sanders is Cleveland's first quarterback, please leave a fire emoji in the comments section. Don't overthink it. Before we get into everything, just trust your instincts, because at least some of you will feel very differently about this situation than you do now by the time we are done here at my channel. Silently, the evidence has been mounting. We are bringing everything into the light today. If you're enjoying this video, remember to hit the subscribe button before continuing. It truly enables us to continue providing you with the content you enjoy. To ensure that your friends don't miss out on all the drama and excitement, send them this video. This training video immediately stood out from the deluge of off-season quarterback content that is uploaded every summer and then forgotten within 48 hours. You've already seen that content. A slow-motion video with a filter shows a quarterback wearing a fitted hat tossing roots into the air to receivers running against fictitious opponents. It appears nice. It is essentially meaningless. Teams upload it. Fans repost it. Analysts act as though it reveals something. It doesn't. When this footage first appeared on screen, it was different. No slow motion was present. The filter was absent. Nothing was being made to appear more impressive than it actually was by the production team. You were observing an unprocessed training environment, the kind of unglamorous, repetitive, audience-free work that only athletes who genuinely want to improve themselves rather than control their public image do. People stop scrolling because of the drills themselves. In order to improve their first step off the line, sprinters and skill position players practice sprint mechanics from a standing start. It's not the second step. It's not the stride pattern 5 yards into a route. It's the first explosion out of a static position. That split second of pure first step power that distinguishes quick athletes from sudden ones. Then came the resistance band work, and most casual viewers didn't realize how important those bands' particular focus was when they first saw the clip. Hip drive and posterior chain activation, the exact muscle group that produces explosive lateral movement, pocket escapability, and the capacity to reset your feet more quickly than a pass rusher can alter his angle, were the focus of the band's placement. These are not exercises for general fitness. These are focused exercises for athletic development with a very specific goal that directly relates to the requirements of a quarterback in the contemporary NFL. The third component, and perhaps the most illuminating directional change drill, was the lateral explosion work, which emphasizes the abruptness of the cut rather than the movement's top speed. Because a quarterback does not have to run 40 yards straight in a collapsing pocket. To buy enough time to reset and deliver the ball precisely, he must move 3 yards to the left or 2 yards to the right in a split second. That is a particular kind of athletic ability. It can be trained. And it seems that Shedeur Sanders trained it all off-season. This is what caused the comment sections to blow up. When you are at ease with your circumstances, you don't work like this. You think the competition is merely a formality and that you already have the starting job. This is the kind of work you do after watching your own film, determining the precise physical constraints that prevented you from playing in the previous season, and concluding that the only appropriate course of action is to truly transform as an athlete before anyone has another opportunity to assess you. On a training field, you cannot pretend to have that degree of self-awareness and commitment to addressing it. Either the drills are being performed or they are not. Either the resistance is genuine or it isn't. In that setting, there is either a high level of competition or none at all. And without being asked, everyone who watched that video said the same thing. That appears authentic. Stay with gridiron ground because the footage's response to the particular scenario that Shedeur was thrown into as a rookie is the part of the story that very few people have honestly covered, and it completely alters how you interpret the numbers that critics keep bringing up. You need to know what the modern NFL quarterback position actually requires of its players in order to comprehend why those particular drills are important on a deeper level. The quarterback of 2025 and the quarterback of 2005 are practically playing two different positions that just happen to share a name because the job description has changed so drastically over the past 10 years. 20 years ago, a relatively straightforward set of criteria served as the foundation for the ideal quarterback profile. Protect the football, avoid taking needless sacks, deliver the ball to the open receiver on time, stand in the pocket, and go through your reads in a logical order. Being athletic was advantageous. Although mobility was valued when it existed, it was never considered necessary. The majority of the great quarterbacks of that era were statuesque pocket passers who prevailed not because of their legs or first-step quickness, but because of their timing, accuracy, and football intelligence. Although that model is still relevant, it is no longer adequate in a league where defenses have developed expressly to undermine it. Pass rushes are more inventive, coordinated, and quick than they have ever been in NFL history. Pre-snap reads are becoming less accurate than they once were due to defensive coordinators hiding coverages and switching between looks at a rapid pace. Because the athletes attacking blocking schemes are more skilled and numerous than the system was intended to handle, blocking schemes fail more frequently. Before continuing, if you're enjoying this video, remember that the quarterbacks who are currently winning titles have something in common that goes beyond physical prowess. They are able to sense pressure even before it materializes. They are able to move their feet more quickly than the defense can adapt to their new location in the pocket. They have the ability to prolong plays that ought to have resulted in sacks into chain-moving completions. Without that skill, Patrick Mahomes would not have won 3 Super Bowls. Without developing it, Josh Allen cannot go from a project to a consistent contender for MVP. It was the foundation of Lamar Jackson's whole identity. Shedeur Sanders watched his own rookie film in this setting during the offseason, and what he saw in that movie was a version of himself that was physically strong, but not yet explosive enough to regularly perform the play extension and pocket movement that distinguish good quarterbacks from those who lead their teams to the postseason. He witnessed instances where he would have been able to escape a collapsing pocket before the sack landed with just a tenth of a second more first-step suddenness. There were times when he could have reset his platform with greater lateral quickness to deliver an accurate throw on a play that instead turned into an incompletion or a scramble for little gain. He recognized the difference between his current self and his ideal self, and he discovered the training environment and the particular work that directly addresses it, rather than waiting for someone to fix it for him. That is not a minor issue. The majority of young players recognize their own shortcomings in the movie and try to explain them away or blame outside forces. The great ones recognize these flaws and approach them as a problem that needs to be solved on an individual basis. The NFL world saw a quarterback performing precisely the type of work that top players do when no one is looking in the training video. The kind of work that shows up not as a single spectacular play, but as a cumulative improvement across dozens of plays per game, or slightly more explosiveness and slightly more pocket mobility, quietly changes outcomes that never make the highlight reel, but absolutely show up in the final score. And the timing of all of this matters enormously, because what Shedeur was dealing with last season was not a situation that gave anyone a fair read on what he is actually capable of. That story deserves its own full breakdown, and Gridiron Ground is going to give it one right now. Let's be truthful about something that has been frequently overlooked in the coverage of this quarterback competition. Shedeur Sanders' first professional season was not just challenging in the traditional sense of the term rookie difficulty. He was surrounded on a snap-by-snap basis by a specific and quantifiable structural failure that made almost every aspect of playing quarterback more difficult than it should have been for anyone, regardless of experience level. Last season, Cleveland's offensive line did not perform poorly. It was collapsing. When assessing what a quarterback's performance truly reveals about his talent and potential, there is a significant difference between those two descriptions. An offensive line that isn't performing well releases pressure irregularly. There are both good and bad games on it. It allows a quarterback to operate and execute on a respectable percentage of passing plays, but it also creates pockets that are occasionally compromised. A collapsing offensive line is something categorically different. It is a unit where multiple positions are failing simultaneously, where the problems are not situational but structural, where a quarterback cannot trust the protection on any given snap and must operate with the constant awareness that his pocket is likely to disintegrate before his roots have time to develop. That second description is what Shedeur was working behind last season. The fact that 5 of the 6 players who played the most snaps on that line are no longer there gives you all the information you need to understand how the front office evaluated that circumstance in retrospect. An organization is not making adjustments when it eliminates so many members of a single position group in one offseason. They are acknowledging a catastrophic failure. Let's now discuss the statistic that has been the main tool used by critics to disparage Shedeur since the conclusion of the previous season. Completion percentage over expectation. The number that analysts wave around is proof that his accuracy issues are fundamental rather than situational. The number that shows up in every Watson versus Shedeur debate as the conversation-ending argument for why the rookie is not ready. That number was bad. It's crucial to sit with that honesty because everything else being said here would be undermined if it weren't. When it came to throws at or beyond the line of scrimmage, it was truly low, almost at the bottom of the league. That is the reality as it is. But here's what that number actually captures when you strip away the narrative and examine the raw context. It shows a rookie quarterback operating behind pass protection that was consistently failing him, throwing to a receiver room without a single difference maker that has been shown to be able to create separation from legitimate coverage, trying to execute a sophisticated offensive system with essentially zero margin for error because the structural support that makes any offense function was collapsing around him. Now here is the exercise that every analyst reaching for that CPOE number should be required to do before presenting it as a verdict on Shedeur's talent. Look up the rookie season stats of the quarterbacks who are currently regarded as the best in this league. Go pull up what their advanced metrics looked like when they were learning the position behind imperfect rosters with systems they had not fully mastered yet. The numbers are almost universally ugly. Not because those players were not talented, not because they were not going to become the players they eventually became, but because year one in the NFL is genuinely hard under any circumstances, and it becomes exponentially harder when the offensive infrastructure surrounding you is functionally broken. Giving you the whole picture instead of just the convenient one is the foundation of Gridiron Ground. Subscribe right now if that is the kind of analysis you want throughout this entire Browns quarterback situation, because every update between now and week 1 is going to be covered the same way, with full context and zero shortcuts. Shedeur's rookie numbers are a photograph of a bad situation. They are not a prophecy about who he is as a passer when the circumstances change. And the circumstances are about to change in a way that is far more dramatic than most people have fully absorbed yet. There is a version of this offseason story where the Cleveland Browns looked at their quarterback situation, made a few modest upgrades around the edges, and essentially told both quarterbacks to figure it out with mostly the same supporting cast. That version of events would tell you something specific and somewhat concerning about how the front office actually views this competition. That is not what happened. What happened is something significantly more aggressive and significantly more revealing about where the organization's genuine priorities are pointed. 5 of the 6 players who logged the most snaps on Cleveland's offensive line last season are no longer on the roster. Not moved to depth roles, not restructured into backup positions. Gone. Veterans with years of expertise. Players who had made Pro Bowls at various stages of their careers. All of them either released outright, traded away, or allowed to walk when free agency opened. The level of turnover at a single position group tells you something unambiguous. This was not a renovation. Before going further, if you're enjoying "This was a demolition followed by a reconstruction from the foundation up," the Browns' additions to replace those departing players are not cost-effective fixes. They are not veteran minimum signings and tryout players hoping someone surprises. They are genuine high-investment starter-caliber players that require real draft capital and real money to acquire.
They traded for a starting caliber right tackle who has built his career as a technically disciplined, reliable pass protector. The kind of lineman who will not show up in a highlight reel because he does not give up the uncontested speed rushes that become sack videos. In free agency, they committed tens of millions in guaranteed money for a guard who profiles as one of the most athletically gifted players at his position in the entire league. We are discussing a player who possesses the lateral quickness and movement skills that offensive line coaches value because they directly contribute to both run game success and pass protection versatility. The interior of the line was upgraded further with a veteran who has played at a Pro Bowl level before. Todd Monken specifically brought in this player to anchor the center of that rebuilt unit with experience and leadership.
Someone who knows how to improve the players around him and has experience doing this under duress. And then came the moment that made the front office's intentions unmistakable. Cleveland chose an offensive tackle from a major program who was virtually untouchable during his final college season with one of their 2 first-round selections this draft cycle. 0 sacks allowed. Nothing. Not one time did a pass rusher get through him cleanly enough to touch the quarterback across an entire college season. He took home the sport's most coveted individual award for offensive linemen. A player of that caliber, selected at such a high level, conveys a message that is impossible to misunderstand. This team is investing at the top of the draft to create a protected environment at quarterback. They doubled back later in the draft to add more offensive line depth. There is fierce competition at every position along the front 5, including a tackle and a center.
The receiver room underwent a major metamorphosis of its own. In addition to the tight end, who emerged as one of the team's few true bright spots last season, Cleveland signed a proven pass-catching player in free agency. They drafted rookie receivers with legitimate speed and the ability to create separation at the professional level. Players who will force defensive coordinators to actually scheme around them, instead of ignoring them the way opposing defenses could largely ignore Cleveland's perimeter last year. Every analyst who uses Shedeur's rookie CPOE number as a conversation ender should take a moment to sit quietly with this portion of the story. Companies don't build a stronghold around a quarterback they've already decided to replace with first-round picks and tens of millions in guaranteed money. For a veteran recovering from double Achilles surgery, front offices do not rebuild an entire position group from scratch.
The ideal setting in a different city to recreate a version of himself from years ago. The investment is the most sincere statement this team has made during the offseason. Additionally, it is pointing so loudly in one direction that it necessitates a conscious decision to turn away in order to pretend otherwise. Anyone who pretends the other side of this debate doesn't exist is not conducting an honest analysis, so it is necessary to acknowledge the whole picture in order to be fair. While Gridiron Ground does not engage in advocacy, they do. So let's discuss Deshaun Watson in the same straightforward manner that we have discussed everything else. Deshaun Watson was one of the most exciting and complete dual-threat quarterbacks this league has produced in the modern era when he was at his best. What he accomplished in Houston was truly exceptional, especially in the football season prior to the organizational collapse. Not particularly noteworthy, not particularly impressive, but truly exceptional in the ways that keep defensive coordinators up on Saturday nights before they play you. The talent for the arms was genuine. It was possible to sense pressure before it was felt. He had a genuine improvisational ability that let him keep his eyes downfield while his legs bought him extra seconds. He was able to throw from unconventional platforms and outside the pocket with remarkable accuracy. No one who witnessed him in Houston during that time can honestly look back on those performances and claim they weren't witnessing a top-tier NFL quarterback perform feats that only a select few players are capable of. Watson would undoubtedly be on the list of the most talented quarterbacks in football if you were to rank them solely on the basis of their past peak performance. That portion of the discussion should be acknowledged. However, that peak was not very recent. Cleveland was not the location of that peak, and between that high point and the present, a number of things have happened that have drastically altered what Watson stands for as a football player and what it really means for an organization to bet on his return. In any honest discussion, it is impossible to avoid the financial reality of this situation, so start with the contract. Watson agreed to a $230 million, fully guaranteed contract. At the time of signing, every dollar was guaranteed. In order to acquire him from Houston, Cleveland also gave up 3 first-round picks, so the entire cost, including the draft capital expended, altered this team's course for years in ways that are still felt today. The search was meant to come to an end with that contract. It was meant to be the move that made Cleveland a serious contender for the championship. Everything was supposed to change as a result.
Since moving to Cleveland, Watson has played in 19 games over the course of several seasons. A total of 19 games spread over what are now several years of absence, injury, and suspension. On his right leg, he sustained an Achilles tear. Through the arduous process of recovering from a torn Achilles tendon, he restored it. After returning, he tore the same Achilles tendon on the same leg once more, necessitated a second surgery, and missed the entire previous season while undergoing yet another protracted recuperation. For a mobile quarterback in particular, whose value is linked not only to arm talent, but also to the ability to move, extend plays, and threaten defenses with the possibility of a scramble, a torn Achilles is already widely regarded as one of the most difficult injuries for any athlete to fully recover from. A primary drive leg Achilles tear could end a career.
Even the most optimistic evaluator is forced to consider whether the player who returns is physically capable of being the player who existed prior to the accumulation of injuries if they have a history of tearing it twice on the same leg. During the first part of his Cleveland career, there were also off-field issues that led to a suspension and organizational disruption. Several civil cases came up. He lost time, reps, and the continuity that quarterbacks require to establish a rhythm with teammates and systems as a result of an NFL investigation. Regardless of how one chooses to frame the larger discussion, those specifics have been extensively discussed elsewhere, but their impact on Watson's ability to just play football consistently in Cleveland was real and quantifiable. Defenses truly feared the Houston version of Deshaun Watson, the one Cleveland paid $230 million for. Years, surgeries, absences, and a Cleveland production record that never matched what the investment was supposed to deliver, even before the injuries made matters worse, separate that version from the one currently attempting to prove his legs still function after double Achilles reconstruction. It is not optimistic to act as though those two versions of the player are the same. Ignoring the evidence is a decision. An organization's internal voices are always more illuminating than the narratives that the media constructs around them. Because sources have agendas and reporters are only able to report what they are told. A different kind of knowledge is possessed by coaches who work with players on practice fields, in film rooms, and in the unglamorous detail work that is never captured on camera for social media. Additionally, it is important to pay close attention when coaches begin speaking in a particular way without being asked. According to reports, Shedeur Sanders' position coach, whose sole professional duty is to assess and develop this quarterback on a daily basis, expressed candidly how much Shedeur's comprehension of the field has changed since the previous campaign. The context in which that statement was made is another crucial aspect of it. This response was not prepared for media day. This was not a coach complimenting every one of his players because it was the professional thing to do and the camera was rolling. In the meeting room, on the practice field, and during film sessions, where a quarterback either sees what is in front of him quickly enough to make the right decision or he does not, the position coach was openly discussing what he is seeing in real time. He talked about an increase in processing speed. He discussed how Shedeur was able to diagnose defensive coverages from the line of scrimmage in ways that were just absent from the previous season. Instead of responding to pass protection schemes after the snap, he mentioned an enhanced ability to see them developing prior to the snap. These are not aesthetic enhancements. These fundamental quarterback abilities are what distinguish players who thrive in the NFL from those who just survive. Everyone following this story should pay more attention to who is truly trending in which direction after learning that they have made significant progress in just one offseason. In his public remarks, Todd Monken was even more straightforward. Monken did not respond to a question concerning Shedeur's progress prior to training camp with one of those well-crafted non-answers that coaches employ to steer clear of controversy. He didn't make any ambiguous remarks about how hard his guys worked, how everyone was getting better, or how the team benefited from the competition.
He was precise in his speech. He mentioned growth that he had first observed in January and February.
Growth that was continuously sustained in May through planned team activities. He went on to say that head coaches hardly ever openly discuss their players in front of cameras. He described it as extraordinary. His words, not a paraphrase, not an overly optimistic interpretation of a neutral remark by a reporter. Without being asked to put a positive spin on anything, the man who oversees the building, establishes the culture, and makes the final roster decision looked into a microphone and described his young quarterback's development as phenomenal. Coaches use caution when speaking to reporters. They are aware that every word is cut, repeated, examined, and featured in headlines. The fact that Monken selected that particular word on his own initiative reveals something genuine about what he is truly witnessing in private.
This quarterback competition is the most authentic in the NFL this offseason, according to ESPN's Field Yates, one of the more reputable and knowledgeable voices covering the league overall. It's not the most intriguing or captivating plot, nor is it the most authentic, that is, the one in which the result is least influenced by variables other than actual performance. He had a keen sense of logic. Even when a younger player performs better in camp, most teams choose to go with the seasoned veteran because it's a safer political move. Yates contended that Cleveland doesn't seem to have that much leeway and, more significantly, doesn't seem to want it. When asked directly about the competition, a rookie receiver for the Browns opted for honesty over politics. He said he truly had no idea how it would end and that it was fascinating to watch. That is not the language of someone who witnesses a predetermined outcome occurring on a daily basis. That person is watching an actual competition where there isn't a clear winner. As this situation changes during training camp, Gridiron Ground will be right here to cover every development. The next chapter of this story is quickly approaching, so hit subscribe and enable notifications. The timeline, the evaluation window, and the particular architecture of when and how Todd Monken will make this decision are the aspects of this analysis that have been virtually entirely absent from the public discourse surrounding this competition, and may be the most significant structural factor in determining how this issue is resolved. Because a close examination of that structure reveals something that completely alters the perception of who this competition is truly intended to favor. This competition won't be settled during the first week of training camp, according to reports from reliable sources covering the Browns. A few days of padded practice won't solve it. There won't be a quarterback meeting where Monin makes a silent decision and roster changes follow. Before committing to a Week 1 starter, Monken is expected by several reliable reporters to continue this evaluation well into training camp and through at least the first 2 preseason games. Consider what is revealed by that particular structure. A coach would have no motivation to continue the evaluation into preseason games if he had already made his decision about this competition in private. Bringing up a resolved issue in exhibition football serves no organizational purpose. Both players are at risk of injury during preseason games. They put pressure on the media to analyze every failure and turn every interception into a 3-day news cycle. In order to manage perceptions and go through the motions of a competition, a coach would have found a politically acceptable way to use camp performance to signal the answer and then quietly moved on. That's not what Monken is doing.
Before committing to anything, he wants to see live game snaps against real defenses using real defensive schemes. He wants to see who can use deceptive coverages and inventive pressure packages to confuse an actual opposing defensive coordinator. He wants to see how quickly people can process information in real-world situations. When a real pass rusher is producing real push and there is very little room for error, he wants to see who delivers the ball accurately. The requirement for live game evidence is an admission that organized, non-contact team activities, including padded camp sessions, do not adequately address the question he needs addressed. That's something that only real football can do. This is the point at which the timeline gives each candidate radically different circumstances. Arm talent is not Watson's main weakness in this competition. Football intelligence is not what it is. It has nothing to do with system familiarity.
Physical durability under live contact following reconstructive surgery on the same Achilles tendon twice in the same leg is Watson's question mark. There is no concise answer to that question. Shells don't respond to it. Walkthroughs, 7-on-7 sessions, or any other non-contact setting do not address it. Only when Watson must plant his drive foot firmly during a scramble, move laterally at full speed, or absorb contact from a pass rusher who broke through the line cleanly does it get answered. Every extra week of padded practice and every extra preseason snap is a chance to test that particular and important question in more realistic settings. There are only two possible answers to that question. Either Watson shows that his body is fully recovered enough to consistently withstand those physical demands, which would be truly impressive and would significantly strengthen his case, or something in the evaluation reveals limitations to that recovery that the medical staff already knows exist, even if they haven't stated it in public. Additionally, the longer the physical examination lasts, the more times that question is posed in situations with actual repercussions. I have been following this story from the start, and you can stay up to date on all significant developments by clicking the subscribe button. The preseason is approaching, and the answers will come more quickly than anyone anticipates, so act now. The question marks on Shedeur are entirely different. They concern whether the development his coaches are describing is genuine and long-lasting in the face of mounting competition.
He has another chance to provide proof for what his coaches are already saying with each extra week of competition and preseason reps. In this assessment, time is not a neutral variable. It is actively working in one direction. Ever since it became clear that both Watson and Shedeur were entering a genuine competition for the starting job, chatter began circulating in league circles about the possibility of Cleveland trading Shedeur if Watson emerged as the decisive winner. A young quarterback with Shedeur's college background and natural talent would command real value on the trade market, and teams in dire need of quarterback solutions would likely line up to acquire someone with his profile, according to the logic put forth by various media voices. On paper, the story writes itself, but whenever someone with real access to the situation confronts it head-on, it keeps hitting a brick wall. The trade narrative has been explicitly slowed down by a number of reliable league insiders, and they have done so consistently enough across various outlets that it is hard to write it off as coordinated spin. When the regular season starts in September, both quarterbacks, not just one of them, should be on the Cleveland roster, according to the most knowledgeable voices covering this story. This framing, which comes from reporters who have clearly spoken to people who have a genuine understanding of the front office's thinking, implies that Cleveland either hasn't decided on the outcome of the competition yet or has decided to keep both players regardless of who starts. The idea that Shedeur is going to be packaged and shipped somewhere else as soon as Watson has a productive practice week is inconsistent with both of those scenarios. Because intellectual honesty demands it, there is a warning that should be acknowledged. Many news sources say that Cleveland's main goal is to keep both quarterbacks, but the front office might not be against a trade if the offer was good enough and Watson was clearly the clear winner of the competition. One insider used language to the effect that every organization has a price, meaning a sufficiently substantial offer would at least receive consideration. However, actively shopping and having a price are two very different things. Regardless of how the competition turns out, it does not currently appear to be a plan that involves moving the young quarterback, as evidenced by the fact that the trade conversation has been largely dismissed by those closest to the situation. The locker room temperature is harder to measure unbiasedly, but equally important to read accurately, and the honest signal from what has been put out publicly is that there is no clear internal favorite. If you ask someone outside the organization, the rookie receiver's description of the competition as interesting and really uncertain is probably the clearest look into what this situation is really like on a daily basis. This player, who sees both quarterbacks on a daily basis, has no agenda to further and no political angle to promote. Furthermore, the testimony of a player in that position who characterizes the outcome as legitimately unclear is more credible than a dozen anonymous insider reports from sources with different levels of motivation. Let's take a moment to zoom out and discuss the emotional burden that all of this entails. For longer than many of their current supporters have been alive, the Cleveland Browns have been looking for stability at the quarterback position. Brown supporters have grown weary of off-season optimism because the list of names is so long and painful. The former top picks who showed promise but were unable to maintain it.
the seasoned interim. The big-budget purchases that were meant to transform everything instead added a painful new chapter to a tale that no one in Cleveland wanted to continue. The Watson acquisition was the biggest swing in franchise history. 3 first-round picks and $230 million fully guaranteed dollars. It failed to fulfill its intended purpose. And now the franchise stands at a crossroads that feels different than the previous ones because the choice is cleaner. It's not a choice between two uncertain options, but between a veteran trying to get back to being the player he was years and surgeries ago, and a young player who is actively, measurably, and coach verifiably growing with one of the best quarterback teams this team has put together in decades. That is the real question, and the answer is coming very soon. Will the people making the decision be brave enough to go with the evidence without worrying about the size of the contract or the money that has already been spent?
Stack everything we have covered today side by side, and the picture that emerges is not ambiguous. It is not divided equally. It consistently and clearly leans in one direction. Shedeur Sanders spent this offseason doing targeted, elite-level speed and explosion work that directly addresses the specific physical limitations exposed during his rookie year. He is younger, healthier, and demonstrably improving. His position coach is speaking in a way that goes far beyond encouraging words. Without being asked, his head coach described his growth as extraordinary. At a cost that teams do not incur for quarterbacks they have already written off, the roster surrounding him has been completely rebuilt. On the other side, Deshaun Watson has played 19 games in Cleveland across multiple seasons. He tore the same Achilles twice. His output here was never up to par with the contract. Years ago, in a different city with a different supporting cast, he played his best football. Physical durability under live contact is his main area of concern, and with each extra evaluation week, that question is put to the test. Shedeur Sanders is expected to start for the Cleveland Browns in the first week. It's not because the underdog narrative is more appealing or because youth always triumphs over experience, but rather because all of the evidence points in the same direction when you follow it honestly and don't let narrative or noise distort the facts. Return to the comment you left at the start of the video. Before you saw any of this information, you left the football emoji. Does it still express your feelings? Has something changed? That's the conversation that's worth having, so drop your updated opinion now. Every development, from the first padded practice to the last preseason snap and beyond, will be covered by me. Since this story is just getting started and you don't want to be the last to know when it breaks, subscribe and hit the notification bell.